2019, Sri Lanka welcomed 2 million tourists. Then came the Easter bombings. Then COVID. Then an economic collapse. By 22, Sri Lanka had declared bankruptcy. Fuel lines stretched for miles. People couldn't afford food. The president fled the country. The world looked away. But I went to Sri Lanka in 2025. And I found an island healing. An island of ancient temples and tea-covered mountains. An island where elephants roam freely and waves break on empty beaches. An island that has suffered more than most. And an island that refuses to give up. This is Sri Lanka, the teardrop island everyone forgot. And here's why it deserves to be remembered. Chapter 1. What is Sri Lanka? Let me tell you what Sri Lanka actually is, because most people confuse it with other places. Sri Lanka, officially the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, is an island nation in South Asia. It sits just 30 kilometers off the southern coast of India, in the Indian Ocean. Shaped like a teardrop. That's not poetic language. That's literally what it looks like. The population is about 22 million people. The capital is Sri Jayawardenepura Kotte, but everyone just says Colombo, the largest city and commercial center. 3 main ethnic groups, Sinhalese 75%, Tamil 15%, and more, 10%. 2 major religions, Buddhism and Hinduism. 4 official languages, Sinhala, Tamil, and English. This diversity created beauty. It also created conflict. From 1983 to 2009, Sri Lanka endured a brutal civil war between the government and Tamil Tigers. 100,000 people died. Families were torn apart. Trust was shattered. The war ended in 2009, but the wounds remain. Then came the 2019 Easter bombings. 269 people killed. Tourism collapsed overnight. Then COVID shut down the world. Then in 2002, the economy imploded. No fuel, no medicine, no food. People protesting in the streets. But here's what nobody tells you. Sri Lanka is recovering. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. And traveling there now means witnessing a country finding its strength again. Chapter 2. Why nobody visits, and why they should. So why does nobody visit Sri Lanka anymore? Fear. The 2019 bombings created a perception that Sri Lanka is dangerous. The economic crisis made people think the country is falling apart. But I walked through Colombo at night. Alone, I took trains across the country. No problems. I visited temples, beaches, mountains, villages. And I felt safer than I did in Paris. Yes, Sri Lanka has problems. Economically, it's still struggling. The currency is weak. Inflation is high. But for travelers, that makes it incredibly affordable. A beer costs $1.50. A full meal costs $3. 4. A guest house costs $15. 20. A train ride across the entire country costs $5. And the infrastructure, actually quite good. Trains run on time. Roads are decent. English is widely spoken. Wi-Fi is everywhere. This is not Laos. This is not a country where you struggle with basic logistics. Sri Lanka makes it easy to travel. So why isn't everyone here? Because the world moves on quickly. A country suffers a crisis, and people forget it was ever a destination. But that means something incredible. Sri Lanka has world-class attractions with almost no tourists. Imagine Angkor Wat without the crowds. Imagine Bali beaches without the party scene. Imagine Machu Picchu without the tour groups. That's Sri Lanka right now. And it won't last forever. Chapter 3. Sigiriya, the rock fortress in the sky. My journey started with Sigiriya, a 200-meter-tall rock that rises straight out of the jungle, like a giant fist. In the 5th century, King Kashyapa built a palace on top of this rock. Not a small palace. A massive fortress with gardens, water features, and frescoes. He chose this rock because he had murdered his father and feared revenge from his brother. He lived up there for 18 years. Then his brother came back with an army. Kashyapa rode out on an elephant to face him, lost, and slit his own throat rather than be captured. The palace was abandoned. Nature reclaimed it. For centuries, only monks lived up there. Now, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and climbing it is an experience. 1,200 steps, most of them steep, some carved into the rock itself. Halfway up, you pass the mirror wall, polished so smooth that the king could see his reflection. Visitors from centuries ago carved graffiti into it. Poetry, observations, proof that humans have always felt compelled to leave their mark. Then you reach the Lion's Gate. Two massive lion paws carved from stone. Once, a full lion's head towered over the entrance. Now, only the paws remain, guarding the final ascent. The last section is metal stairs bolted into the rock face. The wind picks up. Your legs burn. You hold the railing tight. And then you reach the top. The palace ruins spread across the summit, pools that once held water, throne platforms, terraces. But what hits you is the view. Jungle in every direction. Flat, green, endless. And you understand why Kashyapa chose this place. Not just for defense, for beauty, for the feeling of being above the world. I sat up there for an hour. Maybe 20 other people were there. Total. At Machu Picchu, there would have been thousands. This is what Sri Lanka offers right now. Wonder without the crowds. Chapter 4. The Tea Country. Ella and the Hill Stations. From Sigiriya, I took the train to Ella, and this train ride is legendary. The route from Kandy to Ella is considered one of the most beautiful train rides in the world. For 7 hours, the train winds through tea plantations, past waterfalls, over bridges that span valleys hundreds of meters deep. The train has no glass and many windows. You can hang out the door, wind in your face, watching the landscape unfold. Sri Lankan trains are slow, but nobody complains, because the journey is the destination. Ella is a small town in the hills. Cool climate, misty mornings, tea plantations everywhere. It's where backpackers come to hike, relax, and eat pizza while pretending they're still roughing it. But step outside town, and Ella reveals its real beauty. I hiked Little Adams Peak at dawn, a moderate climb through tea estates, past workers picking leaves by hand. The summit gives you 360-degree views of mountains, valleys, and Ella Rock rising in the distance. I sat there as the sun rose. A tea picker walked past, basket on her back, and smiled. No words, just a smile that said, "Welcome. Enjoy this." Then I visited Nine Arch Bridge, a massive stone bridge built during British colonial rule, curving through jungle. When trains cross it, people gather below to watch and take photos. I got there early, before the tour groups, before the selfie crowds, just me, the bridge, and the forest. Ella taught me the first lesson of Sri Lanka. This island rewards the early risers. Chapter 5. The South Coast. Beaches without the Bali chaos. From the hills, I headed south to the coast, to Marissa, Unawatuna, Tangali, Weligama, beach towns that should be packed with tourists, but aren't. Marissa is famous for whale watching. Blue whales, the largest animals on Earth, migrate past Sri Lanka's coast. I took a boat out at dawn, and after 2 hours of searching, we saw one. A blue whale surfacing 50 meters from our boat. A spray of mist, a massive back arcing through the water. A tail slapping the surface as it dove. Everyone on the boat went silent. Not from fear. From reverence. You don't see something that enormous and not feel small. The beaches themselves are stunning. Unawatuna has a protected bay with calm water perfect for swimming. Tangle has empty stretches of sand where you can walk for an hour without seeing anyone. Weligama is a surf town where beginners take lessons in gentle waves. But unlike Bali or Thailand, there's no party scene, no beach clubs blasting EDM, no fire dancers and buckets of vodka. Just waves, sand, and peace. I stayed in a guest house 50 meters from the beach, $20 a night. Breakfast included. Friendly family. I watched sunsets with a beer that cost $1.50. I ate fresh fish grilled over coconut husks for $4. I swam in water so warm you could stay in for hours, and I barely saw any other tourists. Sri Lanka's south coast is what Thailand's beaches were 30 years ago, before development, before crowds, before prices skyrocketed. But for how long? Chapter 6. The culture, Buddhism, food, and kindness. Sri Lanka is 70% Buddhist, and Buddhism here is visible. Temples are everywhere. Golden dagobas stupas dot the landscape. Monks in orange robes walk the streets, but unlike Thailand, where Buddhism sometimes feels performative for tourists, in Sri Lanka it still feels lived. I visited the Temple of the Tooth in Kandy, which houses a tooth relic of Buddha. Pilgrims line up for hours to see it. They bring flowers, light oil lamps, pray with deep devotion. Tourists are allowed, but this is not for tourists. This is a living, breathing religious site, and you feel it. The food in Sri Lanka is the foundation of every meal. But unlike Indian curry, Sri Lankan curry is coconut-based, lighter, sweeter, with a kick of spice. A typical meal includes rice, surrounded by 8 small dishes, dal, potato curry, green beans, eggplant, papadum, sambal, and fish or chicken curry. You mix everything together. Each bite is different. Hoppers are another staple. Bowl-shaped pancakes made from fermented rice flour. You crack an egg in the center and eat it with sambal, a spicy coconut relish. Katu roti is street food heaven. Chopped roti, stir-fried with vegetables, eggs, and meat, mixed on a hot griddle with a rhythmic clanging of metal spatulas. The sound is iconic. You hear it blocks away. And then there's the tea. Ceylon tea is world famous. Sri Lanka is one of the top tea exporters, but drinking it here, in the hills where it's grown, is different. Fresh, strong, perfect. But what struck me most about Sri Lanka was the people. They are warm, not in the transactional way of tourism-dependent countries. In a genuine way, strangers helped me find buses. Guest house owners invited me to family meals. Random people stopped to chat and share their stories. One man in Ella spent 30 minutes explaining the Civil War to me. Not bitterly, not with anger, just honestly. We suffered, all of us. Sinhalese, Tamil, Muslim. Now we must heal. Sri Lanka taught me the second lesson. Suffering can make people kinder, not harder. Chapter 7. The reality, crisis, recovery, and hope. Now let's talk about what nobody wants to say. Sri Lanka is still struggling. The 2022 economic collapse was real. People lost their savings. Jobs disappeared. Prices doubled. Even now, inflation is high. The currency is weak. Many families are barely surviving. I saw this in the villages I passed through. Simple homes, hard lives, limited opportunities. But I also saw resilience. Markets full of fresh produce. Families working together. Children going to school. People rebuilding. Tourism could help tremendously. Before the crisis, tourism was 12% of Sri Lanka's GDP. It employed millions. When tourists stopped coming, entire communities collapsed. But now, slowly, tourists are returning. And the welcome is overwhelming. People genuinely want you there. Not just for money, because your presence means things are getting better. One guest house owner told me, "When you come, we know the world has not forgotten us." That hit hard. There's also tension. The government is still unstable. Corruption remains. The Tamil-Sinhalese divide still exists, especially in the north. The north, where the Tamil Tigers fought, is still recovering from war. Jaffna, the northern capital, has a different feel. Quieter. More guarded. Reconciliation takes generations. But it's happening. Slowly. One conversation at a time. Sri Lanka's challenge is the same as every developing country. How do you grow without losing your soul? How do you welcome tourists without becoming another overdeveloped beach resort? I don't have the answer, but I know Sri Lanka deserves a chance to figure it out. Conclusion. Is Sri Lanka worth visiting? So after 2 weeks, is Sri Lanka worth visiting? Absolutely. If you want beaches without crowds, Sri Lanka has them. If you want ancient history without tour bus chaos, Sri Lanka has it. If you want mountains, tea plantations, wildlife, food, culture, kindness, and beauty, Sri Lanka has all of it. And it needs you, not in a desperate way, in a hopeful way. Because every tourist who visits helps a family survive, helps a guest house stay open, helps a community rebuild. Sri Lanka is not perfect. It is still healing, but it is also resilient, kind, beautiful. And traveling there now means witnessing a country that refuses to give up. 2019, 2 million tourists. 2024, maybe 1 million. Sri Lanka was forgotten. But it deserves to be remembered because this teardrop-shaped island in the Indian Ocean has suffered more than most. And somehow, it still smiles. So if you're looking for your next destination, consider Sri Lanka, not because it's trendy, not because it's Instagram perfect, but because it's real, because it needs you, and because it will remind you that beauty can survive even the hardest times. This is Sri Lanka, the teardrop island everyone forgot. Don't forget it anymore. Thanks for watching.